The first tool is energy, the spark that makes readers pay attention. You had all kinds of great examples of energy. So a couple that I wanted to highlight are the surprises. For example, the first two lines, I did not want to write to you. I wanted to write a lie. That is not the way we expect a memoir to begin. We don't expect it to address a particular person, a you. We don't expect the writer to say, I wanted to write a lie. And so this invites us to keep reading and figure out what's going on here. I also think the dialogue adds a lot of energy. It just makes you pay attention to the words, since they aren't the words that we all hear every day. I'm not going to try to do this in a Southern accent, but here's an example of the grandmama's dialogue that's attention getting. I just try to gather up all the gumption I can before I take it to the Lord. And when I tell it to my children, sometimes I just be trying to put y'all where I've been. Think about including these in your drafts, surprises and dialogue. Images are three-dimensional mental pictures. So think about using the five senses. For example, the thick scent of her pecan tree. And the visuals of this, grandmama rubbed the graying hair sliding out from under her wig. We can really vividly imagine that scene. Also, focus on very specific things. For example, cabinets filled with Band-Aids, alcohol, and peroxide. Those specifics convey the kind of house he didn't have, in which everything was neat and organized and safe. Tension, the underlying push-pull of what happens next. So yes, tension can come from heavy subject matter and from conflict, but it can also come from questions, from readers wanting to find out what's going to happen. Cheyenne pointed out these examples. I started over and wrote what we hoped I'd forget. What did he and his mother hope he'd forget? Why is it so hard to forget? I know you've been trying to talk about that thing going on 30 years. What's she referring to? Why can't they talk about it? If your draft is boring, most likely there's not enough tension. Look for places to put in conflict, push-pull, and the what happens next. Pattern. So the first kind of pattern, or repetition on purpose, is the kind in the ears. That pattern is what I notice most about Lehmann's writing style. Just listen to this sentence. I did not want to write honestly about black lies, black thighs, black loves, black laughs, black foods, black addictions, black stretch marks, black dollars, black words, black abuses, black blues, black belly buttons, black winds, black bends, black bends, black consent, black parents, or black children. In addition to repeating the word black so many times, there are also repetition here of different sounds, different consonant sounds, different vowel sounds. It's just impressive, and it really gets through to you the kinds of topics, the subject matter that his essay is going to be dealing with. That sentence that I showed you makes use of something called parallelism, which is parallelism is when words in a pair or series take the same grammatical form. So this is something that you're supposed to do whenever you have a pair or series, put them in the same grammatical form, but you can use this technique also, stretching it out and highlighting it the way Lehmann does to create pattern that will be pleasing to readers. So these highlighted verbals, they're called, verbs and verbals in these sentences, show you some ways that parallelism works and doesn't work. So it doesn't work to say the frustrated customer wanted to exchange the article, to obtain a refund, or she wanted to speak to the manager. You can see that that third one does not match. It's not parallel. It needs to be to exchange, to obtain, or to speak. You could also say the word to only a single time and just repeat the verbs. The frustrated customer wanted to exchange the article, obtain a refund, or speak to the manager. It doesn't really matter what grammatical pattern it is, just make sure it's the same every time when you have a pair or a series of items. The second kind of pattern that Lehmann uses is the kind in the brain. And so some of you discussed this in the discussion forum, actually in the first discussion forum, the way weight and heaviness come up again and again. And each time he brings it up, he takes it a little bit deeper. So this repetition, this pattern, actually helps to get across his main insight as well. So he begins with my weighing 319 pounds and end with my weighing 165 pounds, weight in terms of his body weight. Then he shifts to his grandmama saying, be trying and where I've been felt far heavier than I try and what I have experienced. So now heaviness is dealing with the trauma, the seriousness of what's been experienced. Then grandmama says, grandmama is too heavy to blow away or drown in tears. Now it's talking about her resolution, her groundedness, her resilience. And then finally, reckon with the weight of where we've been. And that one brings all of the others together to really get across the insight that he's trying to convey. Insight. What's waiting in the essay for readers to learn? So you don't necessarily need a thesis statement so that you begin your essay saying, here's what I want you to learn, readers. Instead, you can lead your readers to that insight. So you have a thesis statement, but you don't necessarily need to actually put it in your essay. The sentence that I think captures most clearly what Lehmann is getting at in his essay is this one from page 5. No one in our family and very few folk in this nation has any desire to reckon with the weight of where we've been, which means no one in our family and very few folk in this nation wants to be free. The way I would paraphrase that sentence is few people are willing to work through problems of the past, but we have to in order to be free. And so that's what his essay, the rest of his book, is going to be doing, working through those problems of the past in order to be free. Structure. Structure is the organization of your ideas, how you put your ideas in order. I'm not going to give you a simple pattern and say, follow it, or a simple template and say, follow it. I'm going to give you some ideas, and really the structure should be organic. It should follow your ideas. So this is the way I visualize the structure of Ben. There are these two bookends, this beginning and end, in which he's speaking to his mother. And then in the middle, there's a conversation with grandmama. Now, because this is an excerpt, I've actually left out a couple conversations with his mom that also go in the middle. So in reality, this is a longer essay. It has the two bookmarks, but then there are 3 squares in the middle instead of just 1 square. But the principle is still the same, that he begins speaking to his mother saying, I wanted to write all these lies, but instead I started over and wrote what we hoped I'd forget. Then he moves to the conversation he has with his grandmama, beginning, as I mentioned, with that comment that no one wants to reckon with the weight of where we've been. Grandmama sidesteps his question when he asks her, hey, can we talk about these things from the past? Instead, she talks about where she's been even farther in the past. Then she transitions to talking about where he and his mother have been. And he then moves back, says, this is what inspired my book. 30 years ago on this same porch, this is what inspired the book. And he ends with addressing his mom again. I wanted to write a lie. You wanted to read that lie. I wrote this to you instead. Now, I've used some colors and some arrows to show you how Layman makes his structure clear to us, how he connects the pieces. So he ends that first section with what we hoped I'd forget, and then says, no one wants to reckon with the weight of where we've been. So those are those things that people hoped he would forget. Then down at the end, when he says, I started this book 30 years ago. So he's referring again to where we've been. What happened 30 years ago, or what happened over the course of those 30 years? In that same sentence, though, he says, I started this book, and that transitions him back into the final section. This book, this thing that I'm talking to you about, I wanted to write a lie. I wrote this to you instead. So this is an example of his structure, but there's so many structures that you can use. So there's a really fantastic article called Picturing the Personal Essay, a Visual Guide. And the link will be on Talon if you want to look at it yourself, but describes all of these different ways of imagining the structure of your essay. So to the left is a narrative with a lift, something that rises, a story that rises to a peak, a climax, and then it concludes. And that bottom dashed arrow shows what's happening over time. The wheel of reflection, you start at the heart of it and you keep circling out and circling out. So you start with a small moment and then look at its context and its context and its context. Loops of reflective commentary. So you narrate and then you reflect. And you narrate. Narrate means tell a story, and then you reflect, etc. Braided structure is interesting. This is where you have 2 or even 3 different stories going at the same time, and you weave them together. You move from one to the other as you go forward. These are only 4. The article actually has a bunch of other structures. And this it's not a straitjacket. When you're drafting, just put the ideas down wherever you want, wherever they take you. But be aware, there's not a single way that's the right way to do it. And then as you revise or continue to draft, you can experiment. You can find out, like, maybe I want to start in the middle of my story, circle back to the beginning, and then move forward. And really, it's up to you. And we as a class will be happy to read what you're trying out and let you know whether or not it's working. I really, really hope you have fun with this drafting. I know that writing papers probably does not sound fun at this point to lots of you, but when you get into it, it really can be. It can be a creative and engaging activity.